My ExMIL had church ladies physically corner my daughter and then lied about me online. I printed the cheating and bullying proof, packaged it like hymn song book binders, and left it for the congregation to find. The pastor had to step in when the whole church turned on her. Stick around, because today's stories will leave you absolutely speechless. Story 1. I turned my ExMILs church mob into a public receipt. It all started about a year ago, and honestly, it got ugly fast. My ex-husband passed away in an accident last year. But right before that, our marriage had already been wrecked by cheating, and the fallout didn't stop with him. The woman he was involved with had 2 baby boys, and when everything went down, those boys were suddenly orphaned too. Then she died as well. So yeah, it was tragedy stacked on tragedy. But the real problem was what came next. My ex-husband's parents, my ExMIL and ExFIL, started pushing hard for custody of my 2 daughters, who were 17 and 15 at the time. They also kept trying to move in with us, like we were supposed to just make room in the middle of all that chaos. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend my daughters were warm and welcoming to their paternal grandparents. They knew the truth about the cheating. They knew the affair babies were real. That's trauma, and they were already working with a therapist. So one weekend, there's a farmer's market near where I live. It's one of those places where you can get fresh produce, eggs, meat, all that good stuff straight from local sellers. And it was especially important because my youngest's birthday was coming up. Her party wasn't until later in the month, so I gave her a budget and told her to go have fun picking out what she wanted, mostly sweets. An hour passes, and I'm starting to get that weird tight feeling in my stomach. Then my youngest calls me. She's crying. She says, "Some older women cornered me." I rush over with my oldest, and the second I see what's happening, I'm livid. There are 6 older women surrounding my daughter, yelling at her that she's unchristian. They're acting like she's a bad person because she doesn't want to hang out with her paternal grandparents. They also try to pull this be a good big sister angle, like my daughter is supposed to comfort the kids her father abandoned. And the worst part is, I recognize a few of the women. They're from the same church my ex-in-laws attend. So I step in, I tell my oldest to pay for what her sister picked and get to the car. Then I turn back to the group and basically unload on them. I told them off for acting like they had a right to bully teenagers just because they wear the right clothes and say the right words. They didn't calm down. They started screaming that I was the worst for not obeying my ex-in-laws like a good Christian wife. Barf. Honestly. Eventually it gets so loud that the market staff tells all of us to leave. We get to the car, and I think it's over. But no. The women follow us like vultures, circling, watching, waiting for something. I finally get my daughters in the car and drive off. That night, once my girls were asleep, I went online and reached out to someone from that church I'm on decent terms with. I explained what happened. He apologized, and then he tells me what's been going on. My ExMIL had posted a huge sob story in the church's Facebook group. She was painting me and my daughters as monsters. She claimed we were leaving them homeless and penniless. She claimed my daughters were rejecting them. She even accused us of being the reason she lost her grandsons. According to her, my daughters were to blame for everything. Like she was the victim of a teenage refusal. And of course, the more extreme members of the church were eating it up. Here's the part that really made my blood boil. She tried to cover her tracks. The church is strict about cheating. They treat it like a huge sin, no matter who does it. So she couldn't just say, "My son cheated and left his kids." Instead, she cooked up this disgusting story. She claimed the other woman was some kind of surrogate because I couldn't have more children. Then she added that I didn't want the babies and that I didn't want boys. That's not just twisted. That's humiliating. So I decided it was time to clean up the mess the right way, with receipts. During my divorce, I had saved everything. Texts, screenshots, evidence of the cheating, evidence of the parents getting involved, and the messages where they bullied my daughters. And because the divorce wasn't fully finalized when my ex died, I didn't face legal consequences for sharing the evidence. The next day, I went to a print shop and made copies of everything. I paid extra for high-quality prints. Then I came home and spent hours putting it all together. I didn't just slap pages into a folder, I made them look like the little hymn prayer packets the church hands out so people can sing during service. The binders looked innocent on the outside. But the first page, the first thing you'd see when you open one, was my ex and his affair partner in our living room, caught on camera. Their faces were clear. The woman's appearance was unmistakable too, nothing like me. Underneath it, I wrote it plainly, my ex's name and the affair girl's name, like it was a love story. Then the rest of the binder was a full timeline. Cheating evidence. Messages between him and his affair partner. Proof his parents were supporting and enabling it. Proof of the harassment toward me during the divorce. And the coup de grace, the part that made my hands shake while I printed it, was the emails and texts where my ex-in-laws targeted my daughters about the baby brothers. One message called my daughters bastards. Another told them it was their fault their father died, because they made him divorce, because they told me about the affair. Some of those messages were sent just days after he died. I brought the binders to the church before service. There's usually a desk in the back where people can grab song books if they forget theirs. They never really check what's on that desk. So I filled it. And then the gossip machine did what gossip machines do. People started talking instantly. The church's Facebook group lit up with comments so harsh my ex and his affair partner got mentioned in the worst ways possible. Even the pastor had to step in to keep things appropriate, because it was spiraling. The church members were angry at my ex-in-laws too. Like, genuinely furious. They couldn't ignore the harassment messages. But here's the twist that made me smile. Some people still acted like I was wrong for divorcing him. They were like, yes, what happened is awful, but you also failed your duties after the shock. And they said they hoped I'd return to the light, unlike the cheating husband and his Jezebel. Even after all that proof, they still tried to reframe it so I was the problem. Still, I won. I got 2 apology letters in the mail for my daughters, plus an invitation to join the church and get support. As for my ExMIL and ExFIL, they didn't just get embarrassed. They got shamed and pushed out. My ExMIL posted on her own wall about how she felt alienated and how nobody cared about the elderly anymore. She even claimed she wished her great son was still alive since he would have taken care of her and her husband. I mean, with what money? Because my ex-in-laws weren't broke. My daughters weren't broke. And I was the breadwinner. So yeah, I'm not saying karma is real. But I am saying that when you threaten people, lie publicly, and weaponize a church crowd against teenagers, you shouldn't be shocked when the whole congregation suddenly sees the truth. Quick clarification on the will, because people love to twist that part too. My ex-husband had a will naming his parents as beneficiaries. I believed he'd told me our daughters were supposed to be the ones included, not them. I didn't push for myself to be a beneficiary. My own will already had my daughters set up as beneficiaries, not him. Story 2, AT&T tried to make me pay $139. My city ended up costing them $108,000 a year. It all started about a year ago, right after my wife and I got married. We wanted to get on the same wireless plan, the simple, boring kind of adult decision. So we walk into an AT&T store. The rep tells us we can both be on an unlimited plan for $70 a month, all in. Taxes. Fees. Everything included. I made sure to ask the question out loud because I'm not trying to get surprised later. He confirms it. 2 days later, I log into the account and there's already a bill sitting there for $139. I call customer service. The first person I talk to basically shrugs and tells me the charge is correct because of activation fees, taxes, and surcharges. I tell them what the store rep promised me, word for word. And they respond with the customer service classic, that's just how it is. I'm done. I tell them I want to cancel and I want that $139 wiped out. They cancel the service, sure, but they refuse to waive the bill. Then they hit me with another problem. They say if I cancel right now, my wife and I will lose our phone numbers. That part wasn't even new. I checked. It was true. So I decide on a plan that makes sense. I'll pay for the month so we don't lose our numbers, then I'll switch carriers and cancel when I'm actually eligible. I research and find Visible, which honestly is awesome. We switch. Then I call AT&T and tell them we're gone and I want to cancel. The next rep tells me I'm not getting a refund because we've only had service for 4 days. That's when I get mad again, because the contract says there's a 3-day window for a full refund. I've got the wording. I'm not guessing. So now I'm furious, because it feels like I've been lied to twice already. I ask for the next level of help. This is where it almost turns. I get transferred to a customer care and retention person. He's calm, he listens, and he apologizes like he actually understands what happened. He says he'll fix it and completely remove the bill. I hang up feeling like, okay, finally. The story ends here. Spoiler, it doesn't. About a month later, I get a bill in the mail saying my payment didn't go through and it's late now. So I call again. This turns into a marathon. 2 reps. Then another transfer. Then I finally land back in the same customer care and retention department. Only this time, I don't get the chill guy. I get a smarmy woman who tells me I owe the full amount because the bill is due. I ask her to check the notes from the last call. I tell her the prior agent promised a waiver. She puts me on a silent hold for 10 minutes and comes back with the same attitude. She says she'll escalate it to her supervisor and I should get an email by the end of the week. 2 weeks pass. Nothing. So I call again. This time, the rep is sympathetic. She says she'll take care of it. Then she comes back with the worst news possible. She can't waive it because the bill has already been sent to collections. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? The whole point of calling was to stop this. She tells me not to worry. She'll send a letter to collections to have them waive the debt. She also tells me it won't show up on my credit report. That's what she said. 6 months later, I get a letter from a collections agency in Georgia called Sequium Asset Solutions trying to collect the $139. I immediately send them a certified letter demanding they verify the debt. Because if it's real, prove it. If it's not, fix it. No response for 2 months. Then I check my credit and see a negative mark. So now it's not just annoying. It's official. I write to all 3 bureaus and demand removal. And somehow, thank God, every bureau removes the collection remark. But I'm not done, because the debt doesn't just disappear. 3 more months later, I get another letter. This time from Sunrise Credit Services in New York, trying to collect the same thing. That part was unbelievable. It looked like Sequium couldn't verify it, so instead of cleaning it up, they sold the problem to another company. I send another certified letter demanding verification. Still nothing from them. No new credit mark so far. That's where the personal nightmare ends for the moment. I could sue, but the filing fees alone would be more than the $139. And I'm not starving for cash anyway. Here's the real twist. I'm an attorney by day, and I'm also an elected city councilman. So when I was reviewing the city's monthly expenses, I noticed we were paying AT&T close to $6,000 a month for phones, internet, and TV. We're a small town. That number didn't feel normal. It felt like somebody was padding the bill. I brought it up with the city manager and IT director. We started digging. And once we looked closely, it was obvious we could cut the cost in half by switching carriers and vendors. I never would have pushed this hard if AT&T hadn't dragged me through customer service hell. 2 weeks ago, the switch plan hit the agenda. The council voted yes. We cut ties with AT&T completely. And now the money we saved isn't sitting around. We used part of it to hire an additional part-time animal shelter employee, which we desperately needed. So yeah, AT&T thinks they can mess with one customer over a $139 bill. But they ended up losing way more than that. Because here's what happened next. We went into budget session and found out we're not saving half. We're saving $108,000 per year. So when I say revenge, I mean it. Not petty revenge. Financial revenge. AT&T will lose hundreds of thousands over time, and it all started because they couldn't tell the truth about a simple all-in price. I hope it was worth it. Story 3, he copied my students' reports. Then tried to gaslight me. So I'm a cancer researcher, and I also teach as a guest professor at a university's medical school. My specialty is imaging, which sounds fancy, but a lot of the job is basically image processing and coding. Some days I'm teaching algorithms. Other days I'm just the guy who knows how to spot a bad script from a mile away. And yeah, I'm in my late 20s, and I'm not from the country. It was my first year as a guest professor, so some students figured I was the new foreign professor type. In their heads, that meant I'd be easy to fool. Here's the setup. For the module, they have to submit 2 reports. Each one counts for 10% of their final grade. These aren't just essays. They have to do serious image processing work and write code. Now, students will always try something. Some people do the bare minimum. Some copy. And I get it, cheating happens. But this was different. While grading, I noticed a small group of students had reports that looked way too familiar. I'm talking copy-paste familiar. I had checked previous year's submissions to understand what normal looks like for my grading baseline, so when I saw these reports, my stomach dropped. The worst part? They weren't even good copies. The original submissions had issues, and these students copied the mistakes too. Errors that should have been obvious. Like they didn't even bother to understand what they were submitting. So I did something that felt like a facepalm with a side of rage. I gave them zeros for the copied reports. Then, in the hallways, they started acting like everything was fine. They'd casually ask me how the reports were going, like they weren't the ones who just handed in someone else's work. And one guy went straight for the audacity. He asked when I was releasing grades, told me he worked really hard, and then dropped this sob story about his exam not going well. He basically implied that if his report grade was high enough, he could still pass. Honestly, I was boiling. Not because I was surprised he cheated, but because he thought he could lie to my face. So I smiled, stayed professional, and made a plan. My exam was the last exam of the semester. After that, students usually fly home or disappear with family vacations while they wait for grades to go online. I graded the exams. I entered the exam scores and the report grades into my spreadsheet. And here's where the trap started. 4 students had report grades of 0 because of the cheating. If I left everything as is, they'd fail the module. But they weren't at the absolute bottom. Their exam scores were strong enough that if I adjusted a couple overall totals, they'd barely scrape by. Technically. Barely. That meant they would still have something to bargain with. Now, the university had a review process. Once grades are posted online, students can request an appointment to go over their results. They sit down with me, we review their exam and report work, and they try to convince me to adjust points so they pass before the grades lock for the year. So I waited. Sure enough, the same day grades went online, they emailed me. They said they worked really hard on their reports. They said they didn't understand how they only got a 50%. They wanted an appointment. And I was ecstatic. Because they weren't just coming to ask for mercy. They were coming because they thought they'd fooled me once already. There was one catch. Appointments had to be scheduled and completed within a tight window, or the grades locked. University policy. No exceptions. They'd already be on vacation. But these guys cut their trips short. They literally traveled back just to make it in time. Some of them spent hours on buses and trains. 1 or 2 looked exhausted, like they dragged their whole summer through transit just to get a grade change. And I was ready. Now, a lot of you might think I should have just confronted them with the plagiarism results right away. Like, gotcha, you copied. I considered it. But I had something better. Those reviews usually take about 10 minutes. Students come in, we skim a few things, they make their case, and everyone moves on. I didn't do that. Each appointment, one by one, they sat down with me individually. I pulled up their exam first. Then their reports. And remember, they copied those reports from older submissions. The copies were messy. Full of mistakes. So I started asking questions. Lots of questions. Why did you do this? What was your reasoning here? How did you reach this conclusion? What's supposed to happen when you run this? They didn't know. Because it wasn't their work. They were trying to improvise answers, and it was obvious. Then I went point by point. Mistake by mistake. I explained what was wrong, what the correct approach was, and why it mattered. I basically retaught the material they'd been taught in class. And I made it slow. I made it detailed. I made it boring. Because here's the thing, cheating is one thing. But watching someone try to bluff their way through a technical review they don't understand? That's a special kind of punishment. At first, they still had that smirk. Like they were thinking, this is easy. He's not going to catch it. But as the minutes passed, their confidence faded. You could see it happen in real time. Their faces changed. Their shoulders dropped. Their hope started to die. And when they realized I wasn't going to give them extra points, they tried to end early. They'd say we were done. Or ask to wrap it up. I didn't. University policy. We had to finish the review, so I kept going. Kept drilling. Kept walking through the same errors until the time ran long. And by the end, every single one of them left looking completely crushed. Not just sad. Crushed. Like they'd watched their vacation evaporate in front of them. They wasted money traveling. They cut family time short. They sat through hours of a technical review they couldn't answer. And when it was all said and done, they failed the module. The best part? Next year, they'd have to repeat it. With me. So yeah. I basically baited them into coming back early, traveling for a review they couldn't survive, and then watched them realize I knew exactly what they did. I hope you enjoy your summer. See you next year. Story 4, my uncle built the case they couldn't prove. It didn't happen to me, but I swear to you, this is one of those stories that sticks in your head like smoke. My uncle ended up taking revenge for my parents, and he didn't do it in some messy, Hollywood way. He did it like a professional, and the guy he targeted never saw it coming. So here's the setup. My parents were young when they had me. Not teen young, but close enough that I basically grew up with my grandparents doing most of the day-to-day. Our whole family lived in the same area, and my parents' college wasn't far either. My mom and dad still liked going out sometimes, hitting a bar with friends. And this is where it all went sideways. One night, a drunk guy started getting handsy with my mom. And when she told him to stop, he didn't. My dad stepped in, shut it down, and for a moment it seemed like that was the end of it. Loud music, crowded bar, people moving on. But about half an hour later, my dad got hit in the face with an empty pitcher. Right across the room, right out of nowhere. He went down hard, bleeding badly. The problem was, it was dim in there, the music was blasting, and nobody could clearly say who did it. My dad ended up in the hospital with a broken nose and a concussion. He couldn't even see who attacked him, and his memory was all scrambled from the head injury and the alcohol. The police looked at the obvious suspect, the guy who'd harassed my mom, but they had nothing solid. No name, no proof, and no witness who could point the finger. So the case went forward as unknown. And honestly, that's where it should have died. But it didn't. A few days later, that same guy shows up on my parents' campus and approaches my mom like he owns the place. He doesn't even pretend. He makes these half jabs, veiled comments that basically scream, "Yeah, I did it." Then he tells her, in so many words, that next time her dad should mind his manners. He even tries to downplay the whole situation, acting like the touching he did was no big deal. And then he floats the idea that he'll do it again, maybe worse. My mom was horrified. She went straight home and told everyone, my grandparents, my dad, even his parents. But again, what can you do when it's he said, she said, and nobody has evidence? She was scared to even go to class. She cried a lot. My dad was furious and humiliated, and the whole family was walking on eggshells, stuck in that helpless feeling where you know what happened, but you can't force the world to believe you. I was little, so I don't remember much clearly. I just remember my dad in the hospital, the broken nose, and my mom crying like she couldn't breathe. Then my uncle shows up in the story. My uncle lived on the other side of the country, and he worked as a private investigator. He was the last one to hear the full details, but the second he did, he went into action. He knew right away that getting the guy on harassment or assault would be hard without proof. So he focused on something that could actually hold up. First, he had my mom point the guy out from a distance. It took a few days to track him down for real, but once he had the target, he didn't let up. He took sick days. Burned through vacation time. Put basically every free minute into figuring out who this guy really was. And not in a casual way. He started watching him, learning his routines, his connections, the places he hung out. At one point, he even went to a different bar and hooked up with the guy like they were drinking buddies. He played the part. He got close enough to gather information. Over the next few weeks, my uncle dug up all kinds of sketchy stuff. Drugs. Drug dealing. Theft. Little crimes stacked on top of bigger ones. And the crazy part is, he could have tried to put the guy away for those things alone. But my uncle always said the same line when people asked why he was waiting. If he sent this asshole to prison, it wouldn't be for random nonsense. It would be for what he did to my mom and what he did to my dad. So he waited for the moment. One night, the buddy thing paid off. My uncle got the guy so drunk he basically couldn't think straight, and they ended up in my uncle's motel room. And that's when my uncle pushed the right buttons. He got the man to talk. He made him confess. The guy started rattling off details like he was bragging. He admitted to the harassment. He described groping someone, then talked about how he hit a guy with a pitcher. Like it was some funny story. Now, here's where it gets important. My uncle knew the legal rules. In my country, secretly recording someone can be illegal, and the police can't just use certain recordings the way people assume. But he understood the loopholes and the technicalities. The key difference was that it wasn't just audio. It was video. And that mattered. The next day, my uncle turned himself into the police. Yeah, you heard that right. He didn't hide. He filed his evidence and let the system do what it does. The video could be used in court, but secretly filming someone was still a crime, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. So the guy got his day in court, and the consequences finally caught up. By the time everything was over, the criminal case and the civil case both ran their course. The asshole was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and he had to pay damages to my parents. Meanwhile, my uncle got hit with a fine, roughly the equivalent of about $2,000, for the secret filming. And honestly, my uncle always said that was money well spent. Because the real win wasn't the fine. The win was that the truth finally had receipts, and the person who tried to ruin my parents didn't get to walk away with nothing but excuses. Story 5, I quit, then stole back my future. It all started about a year before I finally snapped, and honestly, I still feel the aftertaste of that week to this day. I worked for a company that did one thing and one thing only: studio family and kids portraits. No weddings, no events. Just portable studio setups, booked in tight little 10-minute slots, with the expectation that we'd crank out 30 to 50 sittings a day. And yeah, it was as awful as it sounds. Here's how their system worked. First, a pre-seller would show up weeks early and pitch a special portrait package to the customer. Then the photographer would come in, take the photos. Finally, the salesperson would return later with the pictures and try to sell the customer a whole stack of additional poses, usually pushing a few $100s total. The company wanted speed. Not quality. Not details. Speed. They'd rather you shot 50 customers for about $100 each than 35 customers for more. Same profit margin, but to them the numbers looked better when you moved faster. I was good at the job. Like, really good. The company average was around $100 per customer, and they'd usually get about 50 customers per photographer. My numbers were closer to $175 per customer, but the key was I didn't rush the details. Details sell. People could feel it. That meant slower sittings, fewer customers per day, and naturally, the company didn't like that. So they treated me like garbage. Raises were withheld because I wasn't hitting their quota, and bonuses got yanked because I didn't match their sitting targets. Every week we'd argue about it. My boss would stand there and act like the only thing that mattered was volume. Then came the problem that finally lit the fuse. There was this pre-seller at the store. I'm going to call him the jerk, because that's exactly what he was. He lied to customers, lied to the store, and somehow managed to book appointments from 9 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. when the studio hours were 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. He'd promise anything to get people in. Want to bring your dog? Sure. Family of 15? Bring 5 outfits and your dog can have its own moment, too. He even offered stuff like "we'll do your makeup," which was hilarious because I didn't even do my own makeup. And on top of that, he'd overbook like crazy. He'd triple book, quadruple book. When he ran out of those, he'd sell walk-in open appointments, telling people to come whenever and that the photographer would work them in. Look, I don't scare easily, but that guy made me furious. Because the biggest issue wasn't even the overbooking. The sitting fee was supposed to be collected. It was only $8, but it was still required. The jerk would waive it without telling anyone, or just straight up not mention it. And every time that happened, guess who got blamed? It came out of my check. So I told my boss, plain and simple, if they ever put me behind the jerk again, I'd quit. And of course, they did. They knew he'd been working at my assigned store. They still lied about it, and when I found out, I called my boss immediately and said I was done. I told him I needed the equipment back at the end of the shoot. I should have walked out right then. I didn't. I was young, and I thought maybe this nightmare would end clean. It was a 3-day run. I shot 316 customers by myself. 316. Nobody was happy. Customers were lined up before the doors even opened, and every night the store manager had to tell people to leave because the studio was closed. People were getting mad because the schedule was impossible, and they were taking it out on the photographer who was actually doing the work. At one point, a customer threw a shoe at me. Another person spit on my pizza. The security guard ended up sitting near me with a chair, staying close like it was a hostage situation. I can't even count how many people got escorted out for acting up in my studio. And even now, more than a decade later, I still get nightmares about that week. But here's the twist. When it ended, nobody showed up to collect the equipment. So I started making calls. My boss told me, basically, you'll need it next week in Florida. I told him, no. I quit. He told me I couldn't quit without notice and he wasn't accepting it. I told him I was an independent contractor and he couldn't just drag me to Florida like it was mandatory. He said, just go to Florida. I don't have time for this. You can quit in 3 weeks if you hire someone to replace you. Nope. I packed everything up and took it home. The main camera was a brand new Canon T2i back then, and it was expensive. I didn't want to hand it over, but legally it wasn't mine. So I had to be smart. Not reckless. I decided to use my boss's worst habits against him: avoidance and procrastination. I took the company credit card and rented a climate-controlled storage unit. I moved everything in. Every light bulb, every piece of the studio rig. I took photos. I made a detailed inventory. Then I locked it up and walked away. Then I did one more thing. I reported the company credit card stolen, cut it in half, and sent the broken card and the combination info to my boss through FedEx. I also sent an email to HR saying I was terminating my contract and that my boss had the equipment details. This part was the sketchiest thing I did, and I knew it. The HR person I emailed was out on medical leave, and I counted on the fact that by the time she came back, her inbox would be a mess and she wouldn't be able to untangle it quickly. My thinking was simple: slow them down. Make it harder for them to act fast. Then I waited. A month later, the police knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting that at all. The company had reported the equipment stolen, and the cops were there to investigate. For a second, I thought I was about to be arrested. The officer was basically expecting to take me in until I explained everything. I handed over copies of the emails, my contract, the storage unit paperwork, and the shipping label showing both my name and the company's name on the storage agreement. I also had proof the storage unit was paid through the company credit card. The officer told me I was in the clear because the equipment was under a storage contract tied to the company, paid by their card, and I had sent the combination and information to them. I was good at covering my own tracks with paper. I had done it. So I thought, okay, this is over. They'll come get the rig. They'll send someone. They'll fix it. Nope. 2 more months passed. I got a call from the storage facility. The unit was about to be cut and auctioned off. I was shaking. I was excited. It felt unreal. So I called my boss. He dodged my calls and ignored my emails. I never even said exactly what I wanted to talk about. I just kept reaching out like, call me back. He didn't. And that's when it all started clicking into place. In my state, the owner can't buy their own storage unit at auction. So my boss couldn't swoop in and reclaim it. He could send letters. He could argue. He could threaten. But he couldn't buy it. They sent paperwork, called, and tried to stop it. Then the date was set. And the unit went up for auction on my birthday. My neighbor went to the sale. He bought the entire unit for $125. I almost passed out. We were totally not in cahoots, of course. But yes, I was there, and yes, I had already planned it. The camera mount alone cost more than that. The lighting, the props, and of course the camera itself. It was a whole working studio setup. My neighbor later put an ad in the local paper: photography stuff, $1,000 firm. He didn't list specifics, and he accidentally put the wrong phone number. A week later, he needed it gone from his garage, so he sold it to me for $126. He had the auction bill of sale. I had the bill of sale from him. That studio rig was mine. And legally, the company couldn't do anything about it. They tried, though. I got nasty letters after I started using the equipment. Then a lawyer sent a cease and desist, claiming I violated a non-compete and demanding their stolen property back. But the lawyer didn't have the full story. So I sent copies of everything again: the storage contract, the emails, the proof of where the equipment was, the shipping records, the whole paper trail. Then I waited. No response. A few weeks later, I received a certified letter saying no further legal action would be taken. So sure, I could have been satisfied and moved on. But I was pissed. And once I got my business rolling, I realized I didn't even have to play dirty the way they did. I built a legit studio business out of what I knew. I pre-sold my own sessions. I did the photography myself. And I changed the process in a way that actually helped people. I bought a monitor and computer so customers could preview pictures the same day and order right then. No pressure tactics. No bait and switch. No we'll work you in. Customers loved it. Stores loved it too, because I wasn't burning their customers with lies. Within about a year, stores and even schools were calling me directly. I had more work than I could handle, so I hired additional photographers. Eventually I had a whole team, including an office assistant. At the height of it, I had 8 photographers working under me. And here's the part that still feels satisfying: I didn't just take customers. I took contracts. I effectively ran the original company out of 3 states. Their chain agreements dried up. Even the store where everything exploded ended up working with me. The jerk lost his stores too. He ended up working at a gas station. My boss got demoted when his district got dissolved after I sniped the contracts. And yes, he left the company for good and used me as a reference later. He was a decent photographer, just a rotten manager, and I had a field day telling people who called me that I couldn't legally tell them what I really thought of him. Eventually, cell phone cameras changed everything. Traditional photography got crushed. I closed my doors as a business in late 2017. The company I worked for closed for good in 2016. I'd like to think my little storage unit birthday plan had something to do with that. I still have the original rig, but the camera has been replaced a few times over the years. These days I do senior portraits and the occasional venue shoot. Most of my work is restaurant menu photography. People ask me if that's boring. Honestly, compared to the chaos of kids' portraits, it's not boring at all. I don't deal with meatball meltdowns, crying, or kicks every single day. So yeah. Maybe this isn't the biggest revenge story you've ever heard. But I beat them at their own game, and I still get to live with the reward. That's all for today. Which story was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video for more insane stories from DT Audio.